The desert never forgave weakness. The air was a furnace, thick with heat, the kind that clawed into lungs and left throats dry like sandpaper. Inside the sprawling military base, engines roared, boots thudded across the tarmac, and men barked orders to one another like a chorus rehearsed too many times. And then there was Elena Ramirez. She moved quietly, always in the shadows, her figure half hidden beneath baggy fatigues that didn't quite fit her. To most of the soldiers stationed there, she was invisible, the girl who loaded their Apache's ammo, the one who carried heavy crates of rockets and bullets without complaint. Her arms were wiry but strong, hardened by years of work. Sweat ran down her temples as she bent over the open side of the Apache, feeding in belts of 30mm rounds with precision. Every motion was deliberate, like she was weaving thread into fabric. She never looked anyone in the eye. She didn't need to. For her, this wasn't about glory. It wasn't even about belonging. It was survival. She had a younger brother back home in New Mexico, a boy who depended on her after their parents had died. The paycheck from this job, even the meager one she received as a contracted worker, kept food on the table and lights in their small apartment. And so, Elena bore the heat. She bore the silence. She bore the loneliness. Until the day everything changed. Captain David Marshall slid out of the cockpit, stretching his tall frame after hours of pre-flight checks. He was a man carved by discipline, square jaw, eyes sharp as steel, movements efficient. Other pilots admired him, ground crews respected him, and even in war, David carried a strange calmness, like storms bent around him instead of through him. But today, as he approached the side of the Apache, his gaze fell on Elena. And for the first time in a long time, he froze. Her sleeve had slipped back as she hoisted another rocket into place, revealing the inside of her forearm. Ink glistened against sweat. Black, deliberate, unmistakable. Tattoos. Not just any tattoos. David's heart clenched as recognition struck like lightning. These were not symbols anyone outside a classified circle should ever have seen. They weren't decorative swirls or personal art. They were identifiers, burned into flesh for those who had survived a program whispered about in secret, Project Sentinel. His chest tightened. Years ago, he had been briefed, once, only once, about that program. A unit so covert, so brutal, that even mentioning it outside secure walls was forbidden. The tattoos were supposed to be destroyed, the survivors buried in silence. He had been told they were all gone. Every last one of them. And yet, here it was. On the arm of a girl loading his Apache's ammo. His voice cracked before he even knew he was speaking. "Where did you get that?" Elena jerked, her eyes snapping to his, dark and fierce. For a moment, she looked like a cornered wolf. Then she tugged her sleeve down quickly, hiding the ink. "It's nothing," she muttered, her tone steady but brittle. "Just ink." But David knew better. No one could mistake those marks. No one outside the program would have even known how to draw them. And suddenly, the world around them blurred. The shouting of men, the whir of rotors, the clanging of tools, it all faded. There was only this girl and the secrets etched into her skin. That night, David couldn't sleep. He sat on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, replaying what he had seen. He thought of the classified files he had glimpsed years ago, files stamped with warnings in bold red, eyes only. Do not copy. Do not discuss. He remembered whispers about children trained for missions no adult should endure. Ghost operatives, shadows sent into impossible situations. He had dismissed it at the time as rumor, the kind of myth soldiers spread to make sense of the darker corners of war. But now the myth had eyes. And they were Elena's. The next morning, David found her again near the hangar, carrying a box twice her weight. He stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Drop it," he said softly. She glared at him but set the box down with a grunt. Sweat glistened on her brow, but it wasn't just from the heat. It was from the fear she was trying desperately to mask. "You're Sentinel," he said. Her breath caught, and in that second, the mask cracked. "Not anymore," she whispered. Elena didn't want to tell her story. But David pressed gently, not with authority, not with command, but with something else, something rare in war. Compassion. And slowly, her defenses broke. She told him of a childhood stolen, of being pulled from her family at a young age, forced into a program that turned children into weapons. She spoke of endless training, of missions that blurred into nightmares, of comrades she had loved like siblings and lost in shadows no one dared record. She had been only 16 when her last mission had gone wrong. Her entire unit was wiped out. She was left bleeding, forgotten, marked as presumed dead. She had crawled out of that hell and disappeared into the cracks of civilian life. But she couldn't erase the tattoos. She couldn't erase what she had been. So she hid. She worked small jobs. She never told her brother. And eventually, she found herself here, loading ammo for helicopters that reminded her too much of the firestorms she had once lived through. When she finished, her eyes glistened but she didn't cry. She had no tears left. David was silent for a long time. Then he said, "You shouldn't be here. You should be home. Living. Not carrying this weight." Elena looked at him, her voice trembling but fierce. "Home. People like me don't get homes. We're ghosts, Captain. The best we can do is fade quietly." But David shook his head. "No. You're alive. That means there's still more for you. Ghosts don't feel. Ghosts don't care for brothers. Ghosts don't fight to keep others alive. You're not a ghost, Elena. You're the bravest person on this base." The weeks that followed changed everything. David quietly shielded her from questions, gave her lighter work, checked on her brother through connections she never knew he had. He didn't see a ghost anymore. He saw a survivor. And slowly, Elena began to see herself through his eyes. Not as a weapon. Not as a shadow. But as a human being who still deserved love, family, and peace. Her heart softened. She smiled more. She allowed herself, for the first time, to hope. Until one night, when the base was attacked. Mortar shells screamed through the air, alarms blared, and chaos erupted. Soldiers scrambled, helicopters roared to life, and the air thickened with dust and fear. David's Apache was ordered to the front immediately. But as he climbed into the cockpit, a shell exploded nearby, and one of his gunners was wounded. They had no replacement. The mission couldn't wait. And then, to everyone's shock, Elena climbed in. "No," David barked. "It's suicide." She met his gaze, her tattoos peeking from beneath her sleeve. "I was trained for this," she said quietly. "And I won't let my family, the only one I have left, die while I stand on the ground." There was no time to argue. The Apache lifted, and the night became fire. What followed was chaos, a ballet of destruction. Rockets streaked into the dark, flares lit up the sky, and through it all, Elena sat steady, her hands moving with terrifying precision. Her past came alive, but not as chains. This time, she used it to protect, not to destroy. David glanced at her between maneuvers. For the first time, she wasn't hiding. She was radiant, fierce, alive, and unbreakable. And when the dust settled, when the enemy retreated and the base still stood, Elena exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She had faced her past. And she had chosen life. In the days after, the base buzzed with whispers about the mysterious ammo loader who had saved them. But Elena didn't care about recognition. What mattered was that she finally saw herself clearly. David sat with her one evening under the desert stars. "You know," he said softly, "those tattoos, they don't define you. They're scars, yes. But scars aren't shame. They're proof you survived. Elena looked down at her arm, at the ink that had haunted her for years. For the first time, she didn't feel like covering it. For the first time, she let it breathe under the open sky. Maybe, she whispered, her voice trembling with hope, they're not a curse. Maybe they're a reminder, to never stop fighting for something better. David smiled, his voice steady. Exactly. And you don't have to fight alone anymore. Elena turned her eyes to the horizon, where the first light of dawn began to break over the desert. For years, she had lived like a ghost. But now, as the sun touched her face, she realized something she had thought impossible. She was alive. She was free. And she was finally going home.